On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, a surprise retirement in the NBA world, plus how will expansion shape the NBA?
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member, and beat writer for Thunder on SI, Rylan Styles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Styles. Follow the show on Twitter at LO Thunderpod. Go check out Thunder on SI right now because we have great content for you over there. We are 5 days a week over here talking Thunder basketball, and in season, more than that, because we'll cover the games on the weekends as well. But subscribe anywhere you get your podcast from to make sure you never miss an episode on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, anywhere that you can get pods from. We're here for you. Today is a little bit of a sad day in the NBA sphere. A little bit of familiarity leaves the NBA ecosystem. We had our last ever Woj bomb. The last time that Woj will be the industry leader, the biggest news breaker, and today, for the first time since I began Twitter, I had to turn off Woj's tweet notifications. It was the end of an era as ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski announced that he was retiring from sports media. He's going to go on to become the general manager of St. Bonaventure's basketball. And credit to him. I think that's great. I think that, for one, he clearly loves St. Bonaventure. So it's his alma mater. But even more than that, it's not just his alma mater. You could tell by the way he was tweeting about regular season Bonnie's basketball, like what an impact that place has made on him. So he's clearly getting to go do something he's passionate about, he loves, and is frankly better for him. Now, financially speaking, I don't know what the going rate is for a Bonnie's general manager, but you have seen the reports of what Woj was living like with ESPN, and clearly he was likely more compensated for his gig at ESPN than he is going to be at St. Bonaventure's. But there's also a price of the lifestyle that he had to live at ESPN, where you're on your phone at least 20 hours of the day. You've got two phones. You can never plan anything because you're always on call. Every single second of the day, you're on call trying to break a story. And even if it's not a forward-facing news story, you're still getting information behind the scenes to leverage with other teams to eventually get to the point where you can get that information out there that we actually do see. So on the surface, it might look like, well, he puts out these tweets, every few months, every few weeks, whatever. What's the big deal? But it's a lot deeper than that. It's a lot deeper than that for him. And he's talked about that. There's been reports on him, reports on Adam Scheffner. Like these insiders have an insanely difficult job, insane, work regimen. And that has to take a toll on you individually. It for sure has to take a toll on you and your loved ones, of course. So I just think that this is obviously a move he's comfortable with and he's excited about. So it's hard not to be excited for him. The biggest change, I think, is looking around and wondering who's going to be the next Woj. And it might sound simple, like Shams. Of course, Shams is right there. And there was a debate recently of like, is Shams number one? Is Woj number one? Whatever. The thing is, I think that you at least need two of those guys. Like you at least need two of those guys. And we'll see who steps up in that place, who fills that role literally at ESPN, who fills that void in the NBA ecosystem. But the bottom line is it's kind of a closing of the chapter book of what it meant to follow Woj on Twitter and get the Woj bomb and the lore that came with it. It was just fun. There were some hallmark days where you knew that all you needed to do was sit around and refresh, Woj's Twitter account, Shams. And then in a few weeks, we'll find out who ESPN hires, and they'll be the new Woj eventually. But it's difficult to ever let go of your first. And Woj, for a lot of us, was the first, real newsbreaker and consistent newsbreaker, and we were there for the shift of whenever there was a newsbreaker in every single market to now there's only one guy, and now there's only two guys with Shams and Woj, and we'll see how this all shakes out. Of course, there's some really talented reporters still, like Fisher and Haynes and Stein on down the list. We'll see who actually rises to the second level. I think that Shams is firmly in the driver's seat to be number one if he wasn't already. But there's also this closed book of they are the ones who deliver you the news. And yeah, like we didn't really see Kevin Durant play for the Warriors until October. But the first time you ever realized that was going to happen was from a Woj tweet. And then you got the article from Kevin Durant himself. And so he's a part of these core memories of the Paul George trade to the Clippers at 2 o'clock in the morning. He's a part of these core memories for basketball fans, and I want to hear him. I want to hear, your funniest Woj interaction, like whatever the funniest thing is you can think about. Because for me, I think back to Kevin going to Golden State, and you're staying up all night because typically these things happen at midnight. They happen right on the dot. And so you're sitting there, staying up all night, waiting on the news. And then it doesn't come. It did not come overnight. And so I fell asleep, and I got a call from my mom. And she told me that the Warriors signed Kevin Durant. And in my mom's entire life, she only watched 5 minutes of basketball. Like she had not watched basketball at all in her life. And so when she said that Kevin Durant was going to the Warriors, I couldn't believe that. Like, she surely was on Facebook, as she typically was, and got fooled. But no, it was real. And then I opened up my phone and I saw that Woj tweeted it out, and it was real. It was real. And so Woj is a real fixture and a real part of a lot of memories pressed between the pages of our mind. So it's a conclusion of that part, and you think about those memories of where you were when you saw those Woj tweets. He's been a big part of Thunder history too, as the guy who has broken stories. So let me know what your favorite memory is of Woj. Coming up though, how will NBA expansion impact Oklahoma City? Will any team be impacted more than the Thunder? But first, I want to say right now about our good friends over at FanDuel. Go check out FanDuel today because FanDuel is doing something really special. You've heard us talk about them. They're America's #1 sports book. But from now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers, every single one, when you place a $5 bet, you will get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Go there right now and visit FanDuel.com, America's #1 sports book. And of course, football is in full swing. In fact, the biggest football game of the weekend, arguably, for either NFL or college, happens in Norman, Oklahoma on Saturday night, where you can bet on the Sooners and the Vols in that game, as the Vols are 7.5-point favorites at FanDuel. But maybe football's not your style and you're an NBA fan exclusively. You can already bet on NBA opening night. Thunder 2.5-point underdogs in Denver on opening night. Go check them out at FanDuel.com. We're back on the Lockdown Thunder podcast, on the Lockdown Podcast Network. Your teams every day. Well, expansion is coming, and we always have known it's coming, but as the days go by like sand through the hourglass, you start to feel more and more good about this being an inevitable fate. And yeah, the NBA has to keep their cards close to the vest, and you have to present the idea that there's other markets involved and everything. And perhaps there is, if they want to expand past 32 and be the first league to get past that 32 threshold. But if they only go to 2 teams and go to 32 and get on par with most other leagues, it's going to be Seattle and Vegas. It's the worst kept secret in the NBA. It's the worst kept secret in Secaucus that those 2 teams will be joining the association. The next question is, will there be any more joining them? But regardless of how many join the league, it's for sure going to be 2, and it's for sure going to be Seattle and Vegas. There is no one who will be more impacted by the expansion draft than Oklahoma City. And it goes from minor, impacts to major impacts. One just teeny tiny minor impact is actually a sigh of relief for Oklahoma City. When Seattle gets a team back, thank the Lord. Rejoice in the streets of Bricktown when they get a team back, so you can officially give them back all of their records, give them back all of their history, and move on. And this has been something known since the day the Thunder stepped foot in Oklahoma City. And the Thunder themselves, as an organization, have, in my opinion, treated themselves like a brand new team. And they've done nothing with Seattle's history, but they've done it respectfully and tastefully, right? They have not given away their retired numbers. They have not gone that far of like, hey, we still own your retired numbers, we're going to give them away. But their records that they tweet out, the record books that they put out in their media stuff, like it's all based around Oklahoma City. And so they're, I think, just biding their time till they can officially give it back to Seattle, because they've always, it felt like, have treated themselves as a new team. So that's the first impact. It's a very big sigh of relief, and it's something that we all knew was coming. And that doesn't really impact things in a massive way, but it does impact things in general. The second big impact is the fact that you're going to add 2 teams in the West, which is already the toughest conference, and you're not going to be one of the teams that get to escape and move. So ESPN put out that Minnesota, New Orleans, and Memphis are the teams that are on the table to be able to move to the East. And of these options, they did pick Minnesota, which I think is great logical thinking. Because while technically speaking, you could think to yourself, well, Memphis, especially, New Orleans also, more East than Minnesota. With the way that the NBA map is, forget about the actual map. With the way the NBA map is, Minnesota has less teams in their vicinity in the Western Conference than New Orleans or Memphis. So you will not be the team that is chosen to go out east and get away from the powerful West, which is now a 2-decade-long stronghold on the best conference. And by the way, is the same conference in which Victor Wembanyama plays, who people believe is going to be the next, LeBron James terror of the league, and is just filled with competition from top to bottom. You do see Minnesota go away, but of all the teams to push out east from a competitive standpoint, who knows what Minnesota looks like in 2027, 2028, whenever this gets done. But with that also comes a new division. Because whenever you add in these 2 teams, you're going to, in some way, change up divisions. I wrote about this for SI Thunder this morning. What I think that the NBA might do is just go to a jumbo division format where there's 2 divisions in each conference, because we've already lessened the value of divisions overall. And the Thunder winning their division last year, of course, was big. It helped them with the tiebreakers and all. But it just so happened that they were tied with 2 other teams in their division. But the divisions don't necessarily grant you much of anything. So as you've pushed away the importance of the division, you can just either abandon them completely and just go to a model where you are West and East, and then you just figure out a way to rotate the games of who you play 3 times, who you play 4 times, or go to hey, we're going to try to split each conference. And for the West, it would kind of be left to right. And for the East, it'd kind of be north and south. Of as many teams as you're close by, you're going to play them a ton. You're going to play them at least 4 times or whatever. For the teams you're far away from, they're going to be teams that you play maybe only 3 times or whatever. And then we'll have our cross-conference games as well. So I did it that way of like an 8 jumbo conference. I don't know that the NBA would agree to that necessarily. I'd be curious to see. They alluded to this in ESPN, but they didn't really report on how it would impact divisions, which might be indication enough of what the NBA thinks of divisions and thinks of this level of where we're at. So that's going to be interesting because, in my opinion, your divisions will include OKC, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Memphis, New Orleans. Then I threw in Denver and Utah. And so like I just think that when you look at the divisions and whenever you look at the changing of the landscape in the conferences, that'll be important as well. And so it's important to still be locked into the West in a bad way. It's a big impact, and a lot of teams are going to suffer that same fate. Now, what really impacts Oklahoma City is the expansion draft, and the expansion draft is one of those hallmarks. The good news is, in the interim, we're close to basketball. If we're talking expansion draft, that's the last gasp before we return to hoops. It goes in a cycle. You have the draft, you have free agency, you have summer league, you have montages of these 2000 stars, and then you have expansion draft talk. Ben Simmons is looking good. So-and-so's in the best shape of their life. Training camp, preseason, and then we're back. We're going. And this expansion draft that ESPN conducted, I thought it reveals just how complicated things will be. And yes, this will not happen for many moons, for 4 years. But when you look at this Thunder roster and who's under club control and who projects to be under club control, plus how many draft picks that they have, and the idea that Sam Presti will continue to hit on these players, if not to the nth degree, at least 10 of these players to the degree of guys you'd prefer to keep than lose for free. ESPN illustrated just how impactful the Thunder will be in the expansion draft. Because here's the deal with the expansion draft. You can protect 8 players, and then Seattle and Vegas can draft, but they can only draft 1 player from each team. And so, for example, if Seattle takes a Thunder player, no more Thunder players can be selected. So you're not going to get to protect everyone on your roster, but you're also only going to lose 1 player. Here's the kicker that I think that ESPN illustrates, which is going to happen to OKC. I feel fully confident that this leverage move will happen. So ESPN drafts J. Will with the number 1 overall pick. And you can be clutching your pearls and saying, J. Will? A third center is your number 1 overall pick in the expansion draft? It's about the leverage. It's about the leverage. Because what ESPN did was their mock GMs, they bluffed. They said, hey, we're going to draft Nikola Topic, who's your lottery pick that failed you on lottery night, that is hyped up as a top 2 prospect in this draft that you obviously believe in. Hey, we're going to take him. Oh, you don't want us to take him? Well, give us a first-round pick in the actual draft, like in the NBA draft. And in this case, they got the best first-round pick of the 25 draft. Give us a first-round pick in the actual draft, and we'll take J. Will. That way, your roster is safe. No one else can pick a player off your team. And we've kind of taken one of your lesser value unprotected guys. We didn't take Wiggins. We didn't take Joe. We didn't take whoever you left unprotected of that ilk. We didn't take Topic. But we got something out of it more valuable than Johnny Furphy, who was pick number 2. So yeah, like you initially see, whoa, J. Will was the number 1 overall pick. It's about the leverage. And the Thunder are going to be leveraged, I think, on expansion draft night. Because the odds of, especially with how talented the draft is, how talented the landscape of basketball is internationally and collegiately, the odds of bluffing as much as you can to squeeze out a first-round pick in the 28 draft being better than Indiana's best available player, is extremely high. Whenever you control the future of so many teams, somebody's bound to be bad. That's a good thing for now. It can be leveraged against you on the expansion draft day. And perhaps you just say, hey, look, Seattle, take Topic. And we believe in him. We think he's a good player, but we'd rather have the first round pick. But the fact that they can, bend you over the barrel and trade 50 states here, that is a massive impact that is unrivaled by other teams. So I'm interested to see the expansion draft and how that all works out for OKC. Because you can kick it down the road, but again, that top 8, like list out your top 8 right now, then go to Spotrac and see their contract situation and see how they're projected to all be retained. And it's like, yeah, these are the top 8, and you still have lottery picks coming this year. You still have, decisions to make here. So they're going to have to leave some quality players unprotected, which is not a luxury that some other teams have. And they're going to have the first round picks to either get themselves out of a situation like that, or maybe you say, hey, we're a contending team. We're a team wanting to win right now. We'll give you this first round pick to ensure that we have a pro-ready player who's really, really good. And in this case, it was Topic. It could have been Isaiah Joe or something. And so I think that's just an overall interesting wrinkle to the expansion draft that isn't always thought about. And ESPN did a really good job of laying that out. Coming up, we'll talk Kenny Hustle's injury as we did yesterday, only with a different twist. But first, I want to tell you right now about our good friends over at Game Time. We mentioned the massive game being played in Norman, Oklahoma. There's also a massive game in Stillwater. So, Game Time is my favorite ticketing app because I love the fact that, number one, it's all in pricing. What you see is what you're going to pay at checkout. They don't hide things from you, and you get to checkout. It's a whole different price. That is a big pet peeve of mine. Game Time allows you to take that out. I also love the view from your seat function. I've only been to a Sooner game twice. I've never been to an OSU game. But these games this weekend, I really want to attend. But where do I buy tickets at? What's the best section? What's the best yard line? What's the best vantage point for me to sit? Well, Game Time has the view from your seat. Whenever you go over and click on each seat, potentially buying it, you get the view from that seat. So it's the lowest prices guaranteed, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. You can go there right now, download the Game Time app, create your account, use code LOCKEDONNBA, that's Lockdown NBA, for $20 off your first purchase. Use code LOCKDOWNNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions do apply. Go there right now and create your account at Game Time. We're back on the Lockdown Thunder podcast, on the Lockdown Podcast Network, your teams every day. Folks, subscribe anywhere you get your podcast from, including on YouTube. Also, make sure you go check out Lockdown NBA for your second listen, a national conversation about basketball, and check out Lockdown Sooners, check out Lockdown Pokes, getting you set for a fabulous football weekend. A lot to go listen to. Make sure you stay right here on the Lockdown Podcast Network. And again, we're back to 5 days a week, 5 shows a week on Lockdown Thunder here through next August. So it's going to be a lot of fun to cover this team, which is one of the most exciting, best, and anticipated teams in the NBA. They did get news yesterday from Kenrich Williams. So the Thunder, as we talked about on yesterday's show, announced that Kenny Hustle will be sidelined through the preseason. And this brings up an interesting conversation because yesterday we were more so talking about it from this landscape of, does he hinder your ability to get off to a fast start? Does he hinder what you're trying to do in your eventual goals? In a vacuum, no. Because in a vacuum, his best value, in theory, is when games get more intense, when games get more physical, when games have that different oomph to them. He is in the top 3 minimum of guys who you want in your foxhole. And last year, he was the top guy. He was the only guy with that level of spirit to go turn a game around, to go get physical, to go get chippy, to go protect his guys. And he turned around a whole playoff game last year in a playoffs that was otherwise perplexing why he was not playing more. find out that he got his knee cleaned up yesterday. He's going to be out through preseason, and his status for the start of the year is to be determined. The conversation that is going to be happening from now until the start of the season is going to be, what do the Thunder do with their roster now? Because it's been easy to kick that conversation down the road because the Thunder have always went into seasons with an open roster spot whenever they're contenders, because it gives you flexibility on the buyout market through trades, whatever. So in July, it wasn't a big deal that all roster spots were not accounted for. And you had the Topic news that Topic is out for the whole season. So that's like you're missing 2 roster spots. Still not great, like still not ideal, but it's also not terrible because even with 2 roster spots that as of right now cannot log a minute this whole season as of this moment, unless you fill the other one. Obviously, Topic cannot log a minute, but if you fill the open spot, that can change. You still have 11, 12 guys who can actually play, who can actually impact the game, and that you feel comfortable putting on the floor. Okay? Now, you add in Kenny Hustle's injury. So now, at this very second, and we'll see how long this lasts, because again, we could get to the end of preseason and it turns out Kenny's ready to go. But at this very second, if you had to play a regular season game tomorrow, you're down the open roster spot, you're down Topic's roster spot, and you're down Kenny Hustle's roster spot. You're down 3 spots on your roster before we tip off. And so does that change the mentality here for the Thunder of maybe you bring a guy in on a camp deal and he really wows you, he really impresses you, because you also have a stretch where you play 3 preseason games in 4 nights. You go to San Antonio off day, and then you play Houston in the Paycom Center and the Breakers in the BOK Center. And in all likelihood, whoever the camp invites are, they're gonna play a lot in that stretch. Maybe one of those camp tryout guys wows you, and you sign him to a minimum deal. You fill that open roster spot, and you allow him to be a break glass in case of emergency. Hey, there's a blowout. Hey, this guy twisted his ankle. We need you for a game or 2. And then you can get back to your regularly scheduled programming once Kenny Hustle's ready to go. So I think that it's going to be interesting to see now how the roster comes together, whereas before it just didn't really matter. Whereas before it just wasn't a big topic. Because like last year we had who are they going to cut? They got to cut 4 guys. This year, up until now, there was no looming roster decision. But I think now the decision's back on the table of, do you fill that spot or not? And perhaps the answer is still no. Because as we discussed yesterday, even with Kenny's injury, you're still looking at 10-plus guys you want to play. And you still have your 2-way guys. So perhaps if the answer is still no. But I think that it at least now is broached. At least now, you've got to think about it. And at least now, every single second of the preseason could have some implications. Because you can always, like I said, sign a guy to a minimum deal and then cut him once Kenny's ready to go. So that's where we're at with Kenny's injury. That's where we're at with NBA expansion. And Woj retired today. Subscribe to Locked On Thunder anywhere you get your podcast from. A couple guests to end the week, starting off with Brennan Rabar tomorrow. That's going to be a ton of fun. Cannot wait for you to hear that one. And until tomorrow, be good and be good to one another.